Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Open Table Adventures. As always, I am Dan the Baker, and we are back today with Table Talks, our little series where I get to talk to some amazing TTRPG content creators from across the internet. This is the premiere of Season 2, I guess, if we're doing seasons. Either that or just another episode. Either way, today I have with me the amazing Cinder. Hi, Cinder. How are you doing?
Hello, I'm good. I didn't know it was the season premiere.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I got to get my A game.
It is actually it's funny because the finale of the last season, I was talking with Gina, and her one of her spotlights was you. So it's like it's a nice bookend.
She's the best. She's the best.
She's great. But speaking of people who are great, why don't you tell me a little bit about you, what you do, who you are?
Sure. Hi, I'm Cinderblocksally. Most people call me Cinder. And I primarily make silly little YouTube videos or TikTok videos where I give advice to people and I answer questions that they ask and I try to guide them in their D&D journeys, or I kind of make fun of them for having bad grammar and turn what they're saying into something silly with trying not to actually be mean while I do it. And then the other thing that I do is I spend a lot of time doing live streams where I review people's homebrew. And I spend a lot of time talking about writing and game design and all those sorts of shenanigans.
Lovely. Amazing shenanigans. Everyone, I think you're just a very entertaining, just like hearing you talk about like all the like even like making fun of the grammar and like all that is just very entertaining. I feel like if anyone does not follow Cinder yet, they definitely should.
Well, only if they want to. You definitely don't have to.
They have to. I think there's legal repercussions if they don't, actually.
All right, fair. I accept.
Yeah. But to start off, I'd love to know where the name Cinderblocksally came from.
Yeah, sure.
Is it a family name? Was it?
No, I mean, well, okay. Do you want to know the lore answer is that Cinderblocksally is part of a greater being of creature that exists in a dimension that is beyond the human perception, and they are the Blocksally. And Cinder is one of the Blocksally. And
of course.
They manifest within me as their human flesh vessel to communicate to people of this realm about Dungeons and Dragons for seemingly kind reasons with deep nefarious intent underneath it due to how imagination in this dimension transfers into others. That being said, the where it really comes from in real life is that when I used to do a lot of theater stuff, and I was never a theater kid growing up, but I lived in Baltimore for a while, and I made friends with this community that was the Baltimore Rock Opera Society, which was essentially a group of like artists and musicians and very like punk rock vibes that would put on these huge original rock operas, and they're still around. And I started doing theater stuff with them, and it was sort of just like this big, super warm, welcoming party. It was the kind of thing where like if you walked into a room that had most of the people that worked there and they were just standing there silently, you would be like, this is a really intimidating group of people, because it's everybody with like giant spikes on their shoulders and stuff. But as soon as they're talking, everybody's super chill and friendly. But I started doing theater with them. When I left Baltimore and I moved to Philly, I wanted to do more theater because it was so much fun. But I realized very quickly that most theater companies are not there to be friends with you. They're like there to do the job. So it was very hard for me to like find that same sort of community vibe. So I decided to put on my own show just because I was like, I still want to do performance. And my show at the end of the show, I thought it would be funny if I put up a way for people to contact me if they wanted to party with me or send me drugs and alcohol. Like as a joke, like there would be like a funny thing. Hey, if you like the show, you want to come party and send me some drugs or alcohol, email me here. And I used that email, cinderblocksally@gmail.com, because I just thought that sounded really funny. And then that translated into, that was like my gamer tag for a while.
Yeah.
And when it was my gamer tag, people would shorten it to Cinder. And I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like that, I feel like a tough guy when people call me Cinder. So then I was like, I'll just stick with that. I like it. Yeah. It sounds good. Feels good in my mouth. So when I decided to do content creator-y things, and I never really imagined I was going to be a content creator, but when I decided to like put a fake persona online, Cinderblocksally was like, It's good. I like it.
Yeah.
I can say it really fast. I know it like the back of my hand. It's good. I already got the email address.
It is, yeah. It's a very fun name to say. Like it just rolls off the tongue very well. It's very it like kind of it feels almost like a drag queen name to me a little bit.
Yeah, well,
you know?
a lot of people, Sally, I think a lot of people assume that that's like a feminine name or anything like that, but it is definitely a name that I think is weird and bounces nicely. And I like that people don't know what to call me. Like, I like that some people call me Cinder, some people call me Sally, some people call me Cinderblock. They don't know. They don't know what the name is. And I like that. I like that people know the name but don't know what it is at the same time.
You're an enigma wrapped in a mystery. That's, yeah. I mean, I have the issue.
I'm just full of myself was really what it comes down to.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I have the issue of people just thinking that my last name is Baker, that I'm just Dan Baker. I guess middle name so it's names are fun for sure. But have you? So you're saying you weren't like a theater kid growing up, but did you do any other sort of like performance, or like have you always been like a performer type person?
I did like elementary school plays, but as soon as I got to the point in school where you had to like audition for a part, and if you didn't do a good job, you didn't get a part, that's when I stopped doing theater. Like, so 5th grade, maybe 4th grade. But I went to I grew up going to like sleepaway camps, and the one that I went to every week, there would be like a big bonfire, and kids could like perform and do skits and sketches, and there were like MCs, and it was all sort of run by the kids. And I got really into that, to the point where I was pretty regularly one of the MCs when I was like one of the older kids, and I was always trying to put on a little show or do some sort of comedy bit there. And I think that honestly is probably where most of the performanciness comes from, because it's not a lot of people, but you are standing up on a stage and acting a fool in front of a whole camp. Yeah, I get that kind of like almost MC-esh vibe from you for sure. Like I could see you like hosting a show. My ideal job would be a game show host or TV show host. I think I love the idea of being a host where your job is just be like, and now it's this thing. Like that's a great life to live.
My ideal job would be game show contestant. So that's that fits. Like Betty White.
What kind of game show?
Any of them. I've
really any of shows. Them. But there's so many different kinds. Like, what if you end up on one of the ones that's like, you have to eat 1,000 bugs?
Hey, as long as they're gluten free, I do it.
Fair. Okay.
Okay. Hey, I applied to Jeopardy once, so still haven't heard back. But you never know. Fingers crossed.
I dated a person who was on Jeopardy a couple years ago, and she did not do well. But she also, I think, did have a very fun time. But there was I forget what it was, but there was a category that was so like diametrically opposed to any of her knowledge pools, where it was like even the Jeopardy research that she did to try to get on it was not helpful. But it's like it's a lot. You got to like take tests and stuff to get on Jeopardy. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, yeah, I took the test. I did all that, so it was a fun time. I did it like with friends. Like we were all hanging out. We're like, why don't we just take the Jeopardy test together? Not like together, but like at the same time.
Yeah. Oh man, I don't know a game show I would want. I would want to be on. I'd probably want to be on a game show where you didn't have to do that much work. Maybe Price is Right. I feel like Price is Right would be pretty chill. You just say a number that you think something is. Yeah,
I feel like Family Feud would be fun too.
Yeah,
because that's just knowing people, like knowing what people like and stuff. So, but I'd love to now talk about, because we talked about the performance and personality aspect. How did you start getting into like D&D and TTRPGs?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've always really loved the setting of D&D, like monsters and superpowers and transforming into things and doing magic and weird ancient histories buried under new civilizations and all that kind of stuff. I just was gobbling up forever. So when I learned about D&D, the first time I played D&D was in like 3rd grade, and I had a terrible time. I went over to a kid's house, and it was one of those kids, you know how when you're little, there are kids that you hang out with because your parents like schedule a hangout. but they're kind of not your friend, and you don't really like them.
They're your coworker. They're like a peer at that point.
I'll tell you what, I remember this kid well enough that I still remember their first, middle, and last name. But they were very controlling as a friend. They were like very used to getting what they wanted. And my first D&D experience was them trying to teach me how to play D&D and run D&D for me. And it basically felt like I was just sitting there listening to them tell me what to do. And it really wasn't anything. So that was my first D&D experience. But then way later, I got into D&D again through the Rock Opera Company, through the theater company. My first D&D game that I like very clearly remember was 4th edition. I played a warlock, and it was like in a very grim, dark setting, and my character, we killed a guy, and my character took his skin and took it to a leather shop and had them make a mask for him, because I thought that was very fun. I was being very edgy. And that was my first character. I don't remember his name, but it was a good time. He got killed by the police.
And you're in therapy now, right?
Oh, no, he might need it, but I was
yeah.
But then I played D&D, and I didn't really know the rules. Like, I knew the rules of D&D so little that when we transitioned from playing in 4th edition to playing in 5th edition, I didn't notice. I just felt like, oh, I'm misremembering how things work. So I that's how little I understood the game when I started playing it.
You gaslit yourself into understanding 5e.
Yeah. And then when I moved to Philly, none of my friends played D&D here. So what I basically did was had a big party, and I did a PowerPoint type presentation where I presented the game of D&D and presented all the different character options, and then gave everyone a character sheet, and then like a party basically a party activity, we all made D&D characters together. And then everybody that liked that and seemed interested, I was like, if you want to keep doing this, I want to start running these sorts of games. So I think I ended up having like 7 or 8 people that wanted to play out of like maybe the 15 that came. And we split them in half, and then I started running D&D. And when I started running D&D, I had only really played maybe 5 or 6 sessions ever, but I liked it so much because I come from a background of like, I love monsters, I like make-believe, and through school and everything, I was always studying creative writing. So there's this, I'm like obsessed with stories. I also like there's really like I like really short little bubble stories. I mean, that's kind of why D&D is fun. You can do like a really cool, weird story in like a little bloop, you know, one little adventure can be a really wonderful story. And yeah, so I just started running for those people, and then I've been doing it ever since. Nice. I used to play so much D&D. Now I play way less.
My like peak D&D and like TTRPG playing was definitely during quarantine. And I think it's true for a lot of people, because we were like, we have nothing else to do, I guess I'm gonna play D&D. Where I was playing weekly games. Like, we would meet regularly. Now it's like we meet once a month, if that.
Yeah, at the height for me, I think I was playing 3 weekly games, which is insane to think about, and I was running them. The only way, it actually changed the way I did dungeon mastering, because it was too hard for me to keep track of 3 completely separate games. I don't have that. I'm not doing that much work behind the scene, and I don't have that much brain power behind the scene. So what I started to do, though, was I started to have all my campaigns take place in the same game world, and it made it so it did 2 things. One, all the players thought it was really cool. Even though their characters were in completely different parts of the world, they barely had impact on each other. The fact that they knew their characters were running around in a game world that other characters that were controlled by people were running around in, they thought was awesome, even though it didn't really lead to anything. But what it also meant was I didn't have to build 3 different completely different worlds with 3 different stories, and I could have one really big spanning game world, and I could just focus on that, and then I could just insert games into it as they appeared.
I've done something similar, where I was in a game with a friend. Like, we had our like little Discord server, and my friend was running a game, and I was like, I have this idea that I want to run, and I feel like it'd be fun to run it in the same setting, like it fits in with the setting. So I was running it like it was the same group of people basically that. My one friend Rook was running one game, and then another, like, we alternated weeks, so then the next week I was running my game, and it was all in like the same world.
That's cool.
Yeah, and it was fun because there was like crossover of like some NPCs that would come in and out.
Were you doing? Did you like build off? Was there any back conversation between different DMs running the world, or was it more like yes anding? Like, okay, you threw that thing in last session. All right, I'm gonna build on that this session. Or did you like talk about it?
It was a little bit of both. Where we would, because Rook had the world is very inspired by Discworld. Had that kind of vibe to it. So I was like, I built some stuff on top of that. And I would like message them, be like, hey, would this exist in this world? And almost every time they'd be like, of course, yes. And then, sometimes it would just be like we would say something in the session and be like, guess that's real. Oh, well. Yeah.
That's awesome. I like that. That's sort of like a separate game that you're playing to facilitate the game of D&D. It's a fun writing project. Are you a big Terry Pratchett fan?
I've only read a little bit of Terry Pratchett. I need to read more.
What have you read?
I've only ever read the first in the Discworld series, or the first two. I think the first two, Color of Magic and
Light Fantastic, I think.
Yeah.
So, did you like them?
I did. I read them in high school, and they were like library books, and those were the only two they had. Of the Discworld series.
So I love Terry Pratchett. It's probably my favorite author. Discworld is maybe my favorite fantasy world setting. The first two books are okay. They're okay. They're amazing books compared to your average book. But in the context of the Discworld series, like if you liked them, you will love the Discworld series because it is the best parts of those books. And then much more of that. Those books are so good. So good. Yeah, I love them. Can't recommend them enough. It's one of the only things in the universe where my favorite stories are the police stories, like from the police's perspective. The Night Watch, which is like the police, the city watchmen of Ankh-Morpork, which is like the big main city in Disneyland. Yeah. Every single one of those books is so good, and largely they focus around the leader of the Night Watch, this guy named Sam Vines, and he is like so anti. He is like what you in an ideal world where racism didn't exist and like corruption didn't exist and. Like, genuinely, everything was like Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, of like, people being what they say they're going to be. He is that for a police chief, but also he doesn't like his job. He hates bureaucracy. He just wants to be a guy that like walks around the street and says hi to neighbors and stuff. So he's like forced into all these really annoying positions of power that he kind of hates, but he also genuinely is like the ideal situation of like a person that's just trying to like do good by other people. Oh, such good books. So good. Sam Vimes, man. He has this whole part. There's in one of the books he's talking about economics, and he basically says, I don't remember exactly what he says, but the line is basically, rich people stay rich and poor people stay poor because when a rich person needs to buy a pair of boots, they can spend 60 gold and get a really nice pair of boots, and that pair of boots will last them for the rest of their life. And when a poor person needs to buy a pair of boots, they can't afford the 60 gold boots. They get the 10 gold boots, but those boots only last about 8 months up to a year, so they're buying new boots every year. So they end up spending way more money than the rich person ever spent on boots because they can't ever afford the nice ones. So they have to keep spending more money just to get the shittier stuff. And it's like, you can see Terry Pratchett is like thrusting his philosophies into it, but it's so good how he does it all. And this silly magic and all the gods and I could go on forever about it, but I'll try not to. But it's so good. Everybody, the Night Watch is my favorite book. Men at Arms is also really good. Yeah. Men at Arms is about the invention of the gun and how that makes people go fucking crazy because guns are too powerful and it's scary.
So you're a big reader. It sounds.
Medium reader.
Okay. Because you studied creative writing, you said?
Yeah.
What type of writing did you do? Do you do?
I don't really do writing that much anymore outside of for my job and for D&D stuff. I'm trying to do more because I miss it sometimes. But D&D satisfies the same it hits the same button for me. But I used to do mostly short stories, so stuff between like 10 and 40 pages. I like little vignettes. I really like I like one-act plays kind of stories. So that was mostly what I wrote.
That's
like bottleneck Twilight Zone episode. 6 people in a room, something weird happens, emotions happen, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I minored in creative writing in a past life before I went to culinary school. I was in music school and I minored in creative writing. I specialized in poetry because I'm even worse at writing long things. That's why like poems are great because they're there. You just have to say something pretty and move on. But then the funny thing is when I do write fiction, I write horror because I just love horror and I love kind of the psychological element, I guess, of it. But do you like to do more of the kind of like fantasy writing, or what style do you like to do, or are you more all over the place?
So when I was in school, I always knew my favorite thing is monsters. Like that's my MO forever. But when I went to creative writing, all the writing that I did like in college and stuff, I was acutely aware of how bad a lot of people are at writing as I was there. And like, I'm not saying that I'm not a part of that either, like, but like the lens out made me terrified of the lens in. And the amount of times that I saw people trying to write fantasy stories, horror stories, like all the kind of stuff that I would want to write, and how terrible it was astounding. Like, and I think the conclusion that I came to in school was all of these people are writing fantasy because they want to write fantasy, but you can't write anything until you know how to write. So all of these people are kind of skipping paying attention to those really important stuff that's important regardless of what genre you write in, which is like characters, like dialogue, good sentence structure, like good sentence flow, syntax, like a lot of those sort of basic chunky things of what should be in a story. Like how do you show not tell? How do you have a character go through an arc? Why is this the moment that we are filming in this person's life? Like is this scene the one that is the story? Like why are we here? Yeah. And so I refused to write any fantasy for a long time because I wanted to become good at writing without being able to rely on the crutches of cool. Yeah. So almost all of the writing that I've done that I'm like quite proud of is there's no fantasy. It is 2 people in a room dealing with a thing. It's the people that are road tripping and get into a car accident and find some weird abandoned house in the desert and have like a spiritual moment, or a dad and his son doing something together, or it's very like human emotion, straight-laced stories.
More of the literary fiction.
Yeah, because I just wanted to get good at writing characters. Like I wanted to get good at dialogue, I wanted to get good at characters, and I wanted to get good at creating an emotional arc, and then I could put monsters and magic and stuff into that later. But I wanted to learn those basic skills first. So now, if I do writing, it's all completely silly, wacky, weird, monstery stuff. But it still is mostly like I like writing scenes. I do a lot of dialogue. I got really into playwriting for a while because playwriting is basically just dialogue. But what I was going to say is poetry is very similar to short stories in that, to me, the most important thing to ask when you're writing something really short, whether it's a poem or fiction or anything, is what's the point? And you kind of have to ask what's the point on like every single word. And that is a crazy mental game to play with yourself, but it is also so satisfying to go through that journey and to, whether or not it's good, to know that everything is there with intention. And that is manageable for me when I'm writing short fiction. I think if I was writing a huge novel or something with chapters, I would still want to write in that way, but it would be very hard to, because it's just too many words, too many gosh darn words.
I always kind of see it as like for poetry, as like a puzzle almost. But like every word is a puzzle piece, and like sometimes a word is close, but like it needs to be changed a little bit to fit in. And that's easy in a poem where you might have like 100, 150 words. But if you have a million puzzle pieces, it's obviously going to take you a lot longer.
Yeah, thinking about it like a puzzle's great. I really like that. Yeah, that makes sense.
I think about everything as a puzzle, which is probably unhealthy, but it's fine. It is funny that you say that like you like playwriting because it's just dialogue. Is like the reason I like TTRPGs and running games is because I don't really have to deal with the dialogue. I just have to make the setting, which is my favorite part, and I hate writing dialogue. So it's like we're just two sides of a coin, baby. Like it's
yeah. I think it comes down to, for me, where the work sits in the process. I really am not great at doing a lot of creative work that requires a lot of active labor all the time. I like creative work where I have to think about it for a long time, and if I don't think about it for a long time, it's going to end up kind of stupid. But if I do think about it for a long time, I can kind of do it quickly, and then it'll just be there. And that's how dialogue works for me, because I'm just like I'm just playing conversations in my head, and inevitably the simpler solution, the more straightforward thing, the more like to the point thing is the right thing. So I end up in this place, and again, I haven't done this kind of writing in a little while, so maybe my process would be different now. But you spend 3 days thinking about something, and I'm not really doing any writing at all. I'm just like thinking about it as I'm going about my day. But through that 3 days of thinking about it, on day 4, I have like a pretty solid idea of what I'm doing, and then I can write it in like an afternoon, and then it's mostly done. As opposed to like I would much rather do that than like push through something for 4 days sitting at the computer.
Yeah.
And I think dialogue specifically is easier for that for me because I can play out the conversation. It's harder for me to like play out narrative in my head, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
I'm much more of like a visual person, so I think that's why it's a lot easier for me to be like, oh, I can see, the rolling hills and like the thatched roofs, like things like that. But I can't hear like what people are saying. I don't know.
I might just talk to myself too much, is what I'm realizing.
Hey, you need a expert opinion. That's fine. It's whenever I talk to other like creative writers, you kind of answer this a little bit, but I'd love to ask what's your like best advice for getting over writer's block. Because I feel like that is an epidemic in the writer community, is not being able to get over writer's block, and then things sitting on the shelf and never being used.
I have a couple thoughts. 1 second. I'm trying to find something. What's this author's name? There's an author who I like so much, and I forget his name. Okay, Jason Pargin. Pargin. He wrote John Dies at the End.
Yeah.
He's on TikTok. He talks about this sometimes, where when he writes his novels, he doesn't write them linearly, and a lot of people do. But he sees them as like he sees a book as like a million different tasks, and he just picks the part to work on that he wants to work on. If he doesn't have, if he's struggling with something in the first chapter, he just skips it and just is like, okay, I have a cool idea for a fight scene that's going to be at the end. I'm just going to work on that. So I think that's part of it, is just picking. You don't have to. The end is the end of your piece. Like when it's done, it's done. But how you get there, there's no real right or wrong way. So if you're having writer's block in one direction, go in a completely different direction and see what else happens. The other author that I think gives really good advice about this is Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury wrote like The Illustrated Man and The Martian Chronicles and stuff. Old writer, he's dead now, but one of the better like public speakers out there. You can still find his speeches on.
I love Ray Bradbury.
Very inspiring. Yeah, he's amazing. And he has this one. I don't remember. I'm sure he said this more than once, but in one speech he gave at a college or something, he said, "You don't have to write well. You just have to write." So even if you have writer's block, you should just do it, because if you write a story a week for a whole year, at the end of that year, regardless of your skill level when you start that year, if you finish a story a week, you will have at least 4 or 5 really good stories. And like, when you think about it that way, writing a story a week feels like a lot, but it also isn't that much. And finishing I would love to be able to say at the end of a year I wrote 5 stories that I'm really proud of. And I think a lot of people end up doing much less writing because they're trying to finish or trying to find that really good story before they even start it. And it's like people that it's like if you're gonna start lifting weights, you kind of need to just start. You don't want to spend too much time like figuring out. You don't want to spend too much time like figuring out what are the right like pants to buy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or what are the right weights? Like it's better to just start trying stuff. So yeah, I would say just do it. Just write. Like if you don't know what to write, just write. Just start telling a story. It doesn't even matter if it's a bad story. Just start writing something. And that something usually turns into something else.
Yeah, I had a creative writing teacher who, not even like in college, this was my middle school creative writing teacher, who like her advice was just to always schedule just what she would call button chair time, where you are from this time to this time, your butt is in the chair and you are writing. Doesn't matter what, it doesn't have to be like, if you're working on a project, you don't have to write for that project. Like you can write whatever you want. And yeah, I think that's like my advice is always, just write, but like it doesn't even have to be guided writing. Like you could just be like, I have all these words in my head that I feel like sound cool. I'm just going to write down every word that I think sounds cool. And eventually you're going to be like, oh, if I put this word with this word, that sounds fun. And like, I think that's the puzzle, the puzzle maker in me a little bit.
That reminds me of, there was an exercise that a teacher had us do once that was super fun, where you had to come up with 10 words, I think. And there were certain parameters around how you picked the words. I don't remember what they were. And then you had to write a poem or a story that just used those words.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't even 10 words. I think it was less. I think it was like 5. So, but it would turn into this thing like, okay, I have to sort of figure out what meaning I can attribute to this word beyond its normal meaning and in different ways. And it was it very much also felt like a puzzle. Like, okay, I have these really weird oblong pieces. How do I smush them together so that it is taking you on a journey, even though they're kind of just 5 arbitrary words?
Yeah, it's a puzzle, but there are absolutely no like corner or edge pieces. Like it's like it's I would love to now talk about, because you're I was about to say a monster lover, but that has a different connotation. You are an aficionado of monsters. Where did that stem from? Where did that start?
I wish I knew, man. I remember loving monsters as early as I remember being a person. Yeah, I'm not sure. I distinctly remember being very little, and like under the age of 3, and watching Barney, and thinking, I wish he looked more like a real T-Rex.
Of course.
Like I wish he had sharp teeth. Like when I would draw pictures of Barney, I would give him sharp teeth and claws because I thought he should look more like a scary dinosaur. And this was like when I watched that show and enjoyed it earnestly, and like the song, like I was the right age for it. So like I don't know, even then I liked monsters. I like pushing the limit of reality. Like I like these things that are larger than life and kind of represent things that are bigger than us or unknown or push the boundaries of what's possible. I like representations of power that are not organizational, but are like a storm. Like I like in the same way, like I like giant storms. Like when there's a huge storm, that's like my favorite thing.
Yeah.
So there's something about like creatures that like hold that kind of power too. And I think that on like a very visceral level, that's kind of what a monster is. Like a monster is essentially a slightly unknown creature that's a little bit more powerful than your average Joe. Like if you're boiling it all down.
Do you like the sort of like the H.P. Lovecraft, like that kind of like Lovecraftian monsters, or where they're like kind of the unknowable?
I like them conceptually. I'm gonna be honest. I really struggle with H.P. Lovecraft's writing.
Yes.
I'm very specific in what I like, and I've had to read a lot in my life just because of what I studied in school. I don't love prose that is just sort of flow. I don't like that old style of writing. Like, I had to read Moby Dick all the way through. I had, I've read a lot of stuff that, like, I didn't enjoy reading it at all, but I enjoyed that I did read it, if that makes sense. Like, like I liked it in Aftermath, and that's sort of how I feel about Lovecraft. Like, I don't know. And I would also say that I also don't really think there's that much Lovecraftian horror that is done well in movies either. Like, I don't think there's that much of it that it actually exists in a way that represent, like, I feel like it's much better represented in, like, video games than it is in movies. And there are books, I think, that do some good Lovecraftian stuff. John Dies at the End is a good one. There's a book called The Har, which is super weird. It's by this author. It's over there on the floor. But it's a book about, like, an old woman lives on this, like, beachside town in Scotland, and the town is getting bought out by, like, land developers, and she's, like, an old woman, and the land developers are, like, harassing her neighbors, and it's like the worst situation for an old person to be in. She's all alone, and she finds this, like, weird, gross jellyfish, and somehow she starts sort of communicating with it, and it's essentially some sort of weird giant amoeba sea monster, and they, like, become friends, and it, like, helps her take revenge on the on the land developers. But it's a really good, like, weird eldritch horror, slimy goo, very body horror. And it's great. But the Har, Har. It's a silly one. It's one of the ones where you really hate the bad guys, and, like, they do a really good job of making the people you're not supposed to like feel really shitty. So when they get like melted and eaten by, like, giant alien ooze, you're like, get him. I like it conceptually. I think I like eldritch horror more in, like, D&D than I do in movies. There's some good eldritch horror movies. Event Horizon is pretty good. But I'm trying to think of, like, what's a good eldritch horror movie that is really trying to do the thing where it's, like, genuine, like, Cthulhu shenanigans, and I can't think of it.
It's really not.
Like,
there's
ones that are kind of fun from, like, a campy perspective.
I was like, it's hard to do that in a way that's not, like, almost campy and, like, a little, like, because, like, the whole concept is, like, they're these unknowable, beings that, like, if you regard their true form, you, like, disintegrate. It's like, that's very hard to convey in a movie. Like, The Thing maybe is eldritch horror, but, like, really, it's not cosmic in that. It's really just the body horror side, and that's one of my favorite movies ever. But yeah, I'd have to think about it. I'm not sure. I found, but with H.P. Lovecraft and kind of, like, books of that era, listening to them on audiobook, for me, I enjoy them, like, tenfold than, like, reading them.
I think makes a lot of sense.
Just because, like, I feel like there's less work for my eyes. I think, like, it's a lot easier to listen to something, and, like, I can glaze over a little bit.
And that type of language, I think, also is easier on the mind. Like, it's sort of like I don't know. Like, I used to do. I was a theology major for, like, a hot second. So, not really because I'm a religious person, because I'm really not. But I do like spiritual stories and religious stories. And a lot of, like, old Bible stuff or, like, old religious text is way easier to listen to than it is to read, in that same sort of way, where it just sits nicer in the ears.
But have you ever played like, any, like, Call of Cthulhu or anything like that?
I played Call of Cthulhu once, and I didn't really understand how to play, but I had fun.
It is hard to. I feel like Call of Cthulhu is hard to wrap your mind around, coming from, like, really only playing D&D and, like, a D20 system, especially, like, looking at the skill sheet and being like, there's so many, different things. Like, how many points should I put in accounting? Do I need scuba diving? Like, what's, like, what?
I distinctly remember barely looking at my character sheet. It was one of those things where it's like, I'm just hanging out, and the dungeon master's telling me what to do. It was fun.
What about Monster of the Week? Have you ever played that? That's my favorite TTRPG.
So I got into Monster of the Week because of the Adventure Zone.
Amnesty, the best season.
And that was actually, I think... you are not the first person that I've heard say that. It's also the last season that I listened to, so I can't say if the other ones were better or worse. but yeah, I like it a lot. I like the whole like mixed failure, mixed success system.
The Powered by the Apocalypse is
it's really fun, and the character sheet systems I thought really fun, where it's sort of like it does the thing that D&D I think doesn't do well, where it does sort of the character sheet is simpler, and all of the growth is like on it, so you can kind of see like you understand pretty much your whole character with the character sheet. Like you don't need supplementary material, so it's simpler, but it also does kind of give that element of video game scratching of the itch, where you do legitimately feel like you are upgrading and like you're like
like a skill tree kind of vibe to it.
Yeah, and it's weird because on one hand I do think it leans much more into the open-ended from a narrative perspective, from like a storytelling, like way less video gamey, in that there's a lot that's up to like interpretation of the players and the GM, but the tactileness of it is very video gamey in a way that's very satisfying.
No, I
like being the monster. I like being the monster one. That was my favorite.
Oh, the monstrous, yeah, that's a fun one. That's the game that I wrote or am writing is like essentially I like took what I liked from Monster of the Week and then just added other things to it. And I kind of Frankensteined it a little bit.
That's awesome.
But like used Monster of the Week, like the like base system essentially. But I love Monster of the Week. But I feel like that is like, it is funny because the focus is less on the monster itself. You know what I mean? Like it's more on the investigation aspect. It's more of almost like the Scooby-Doo aspect of it, than like the actual manifestation of the monster. In my opinion, at least.
No, 100%. I mean, the certainly that was that in Amnesty, but on the show, when I played it, it was very similar. I think we had maybe one combat encounter with the monster, but most of the game was us like going around town. And the thing that was kind of interesting was a lot of the stuff that wasn't combat encounters, I think because of the way Powered by the Apocalypse and Monster of the Week work, a lot of the non-combat encounters kind of had the same rhythm as combat encounters.
Yeah.
So it didn't feel like there was anything lacking by not having combat. And I picked the guy where I was a big werewolf man, and I was still getting to do all sorts of cool, goofy stuff. And I was I also, though, I love being very simple, very blunt, very martial characters, but I also don't particularly need that much combat in my games. I just don't want to have to think about what my powers are. Like, I'd much rather just sit in the head of the character. I would much, like, if we were going to be playing an Avatar The Last Airbender RPG, I would much rather be Sokka and just get to think in roleplay and not have to deal with the mechanical complications of bending. Because I just want to roleplay and be in character. And I think that may be because I'm a dungeon master most of the time, and I just like, if I get to be a player, I just want to sit in the story. I don't have to think about anything.
I am very similar with in like that aspect, but it's funny because in D&D I do basically only play spellcasters. But I feel like I just have a really more like simplified approach to playing spellcasters, where I'm like, I know what spells that like are like what I want to cast more regularly, and then everything else is kind of auxiliary, and I don't need to focus on those. I feel like that's like, you need to like, with like D&D, like you said, like you need all those kind of auxiliary extra components in comparison to, you know, a more simplified character sheet. But I feel like if you simplify it yourself a little bit, you DIY it, it is a lot easier to play, and in my opinion, a lot more fun.
Maybe that's what I'll do next time I'm going to be a spell. I'm playing in a Daggerheart game on Friday. I think it's actually going to be streamed. I still have to look at the rules. I know nothing yet. So I have to do a little bit. So and with Daggerheart, I was like, I'm not going spellcaster because again, I need simple character. But maybe I'm like, nah, fuck it. I'm just gonna pick. Maybe I'll force myself to look at spellcasters and just be very simple in things I pick. I'm in a Pathfinder campaign, and I was like, oh, I'll play. Let me play a martial class. I would love to do just like a fighter. And then I was like, oh no, but I can be a witch. I'll be a witch. I have not played that much Pathfinder, but I have enjoyed it every time I've played it quite a bit.
It's a
Pathfinder
fun game.
feels like and I know this is not the case, and I'm sure lots of Pathfinder people will not necessarily like this, but I do feel like
they're already canceling you for sure.
Yeah, if D&D is kind of like Smash Brothers, Pathfinder is like Smash Bros. Melee, where it's like it feels like it has it's just like there's a lot of shit in it. Like, it feels like Pathfinder has a whole lot more options for what you can do and be as a player, for better and for worse.
Yeah. It is more, yeah, I feel like there's more DIY aspects to it of, you know, you can kind of, like, I think D&D just holds your hand a bit more, like, more than Pathfinder does, which some people like, some people don't. Zach, who is running the game, has been holding my hand the whole time to, like, because I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Tell me what to do, please.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But the character creation options in Pathfinder seem a lot of fun. Like, if only just because there's a lot of stuff that is there that people like want in D&D but doesn't really work for the D&D system, or because it's just new. Like, it's just different. It's fun to see reinterpretations of things. It's fun to see new things. And Pathfinder is similar enough to D&D that you can kind of just hop in. You're gonna be forgetting rules and needing clarifications because there are some really big differences. But it is it's like different enough in terms of like what toys you get that I do think it feels like a breath of fresh air, if only just because there's like new stuff. It's sort of like, here's a completely different version of D&D where everything works a little different, and there's some new classes and a bunch of new subclasses. Like, that would be cool, and that's kind of what it feels like it is a lot of the time.
It's almost like when there's like a new Pokemon game that comes out, you know, like it's like you recognize what's going on, but there's a lot extra things in there that you get to play with. Yeah. And also,
you learn more about game design too. Like, there are some really interesting things that Pathfinder does that D&D just doesn't, in terms of like how it deals with like perception and like action economy, and it's one of those things where like if you're somebody that wants to be a game designer, it's good to like see what's happening in other people's neighbors, in other people's backyards, you know.
Have you ever tried to like foray into like the more like, because you know, do like homebrew and stuff like that, but like actual game design? Have you ever tried getting into that? I have been a part of Kickstarters. I've been part of D&D projects before, but not as a writer. I've done art for books before, but I have never tried to design my own TTRPG outside of very simple things like that I came up with like very quickly to confront my family. But I have a D&D campaign book that I'm working on right now with TTRPG, Professor TTRPG, Mason, if you're familiar with him, and Patrick Perini of Unbalanced Encounters. So that's like more of a game design thing in a very serious way, but it is also D&D. Although I'm pretty sure the way that we're working on it is we're trying to make it in such a way that, like, depending on what happens with like Valiant and other new systems that are coming out, we want to play around with making it, see if we can make it fit in other systems too. We're more
building
modular,
it in a system,
Cool, nice. So I think that's all the questions I have for you.
Okay, did I do good?
You did. You pass. A+.
Yes.
But now to the actual graded part. No, A+. A+.
Oh, A+. Listen, I'll take a B+. Yeah. B+ is good, man. B+. B+ is fine.
Yeah. But now to the game portion of the interview, which is the one that you get actual points for. So that's
Okay. This is
I have a game for you that I'm calling "There's No Place Like Homebrew." I had to do a homebrew game because that's your brand.
Yeah.
I was going to do monsters, but I'm instead doing magic items because I was like, I want to be a little challenged. So I have here 6 magic items. Some of them are official D&D content. Some of them are homebrew.
Okay.
I will name them, give you a little description, and you let me know what you think it is.
Okay. I love this. I love this so much. Yeah.
And some of them are not just like 5e. Some of them are earlier editions as well.
Okay.
Cool. All right. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
How 1 to 10? How confident do you think you are?
Well, if you're using older editions, that's dropping my confidence like 2. So I'm gonna say if I was at like an 8 before, I'm closer to like a 6 or a 5.
Okay.
Somewhere between a 5 and an 8.
Okay. Cool. So first one is the Wand of Wonder, which is a wand that can create 7 random magical effects each day from a table of over 20 possible magic effects.
So the Wand of Wonder is unquestionably a real magic item. It is one of my favorite magic items.
Oh, good.
And fun fact, if you are a dungeon master that wants to give your players a little bit of chaos power, it is one of the most balanced chaos power magic items to give to a low-level party. Give it to your party when they get to level 3, or even level 2, maybe. Because it's so random, but the random is mostly good, and it's not crazy, but it feels kind of crazy when you're early level. I love the Wand of Wonder. Great item. Great item.
Good job. I knew it was your favorite, so it's an easy one. Cool. So yeah, that is official D&D. So our next one is the Ring of Contrariness. It's a ring that can give you multiple magical properties like flight, levitation, or invisibility, but also forces the wearer to disagree with every single thing that they are told.
Okay, I'm going to guess that this is homebrew. But I wouldn't be surprised if you tell me this is some second edition nonsense. I accept. But I'm guessing homebrew.
It is literally second edition D&D.
Oh god, dang it! It sounded like second edition D&D. Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
Oh,
I had to check to make sure. I was like, is this actually homebrew? And it got on this Gizmodo list out for the wrong reason. But no, second edition.
Forcing a character to always disagree and that's the kind of thing that would be so fun if you're playing D&D with like your friends around a table in a basement where you're like throwing candy at each other and stuff like that type of D&D where it's a little bit like we're just laughing and punching each other. But I feel like that would be so fucking irritating in any sort of D&D game that I'm playing these days.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like it's very battle mode mindset, you know?
And like it's fun that it's a combination of both like a practical effect and then also like a role play effect, I guess. I think that's really fun.
But what an abrasive role play effect. You know what I mean? Like literally it's like create trouble at the table.
Exactly. Number 3 is The Gossiper's Diary, which is a small leather-bound diary that you can write a name of a person or creature in it, and the diary will tell you a random secret about them. The DM's discretion.
Okay. Now, there are things in D&D that do things like this that I'm aware of. But I don't believe that this is a magic item. I'm going to say again that this one is homebrew. But if it's not, I accept that because there are things that I know about that do things very similar to that. But I can't think of a book that would do... Okay, yeah, I'm going to say homebrew. Homebrew. Call it.
It is homebrew.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a fun homebrew item. That's like a book that lets you cast legend lore on somebody. That's
cool. Like a limited legend lore for sure.
Which is always put legend lore in magic items because no one ever takes that spell.
Yeah. Also, I just realized that I'm the game show host and you're the game show contestant right now.
I know we switched role roles.
Yeah. So you're 2 for 3 right now.
Higher than I thought I was going to be.
Hey, good. Next one, number 4, is the Bowl of Watery Death. It is a normal-looking bowl, but when one puts water or any liquid in the bowl, they are shrunk down to about ant size and fall into the bowl to drown.
Now, if this was any other day, I would say this was homebrew. But I'm 99% sure that about 3 days ago, I read an article on Reddit about weird old magic items that like couldn't really make sense in the game anymore or just like are so out there. And I think they mentioned that item. I don't remember the name of the item, but there definitely was a trap or something that existed in the game where if you eat or drink from a thing, you are shrunken down into it and fall into it. So I'm gonna say real item, and I'm gonna say it's from earlier editions, earlier than 4th, probably 3rd or 2nd.
Yeah, it is. I couldn't find exactly which edition it was in for some reason. Like, I did all the Googling, but it was, yeah, definitely not 5e. And it was, I did get this from, like, a Reddit thread. So I'm pretty sure this was exactly...
Might have read the same thing. That's so funny. That's so funny.
But yes, that is a real magic item. The Bowl of Watery Death.
Item.
Yeah.
That's another... Listen, this is what I think... This is one of those things where it's like, it's good to hold yourself to a high standard when you want to be a creator, when you want to be a designer, when you want to be a writer. But it's also important to remember, like, the goal of the thing you're making and to keep that in mind. So,
yeah,
the Bowl of Watery Death is a silly name, but also it's a tool for a game where the goal is fun, you know? So I think it's a great magic item name in the context of, like, what it's intended to be used for.
Yeah.
But because so many people end up, I think, taking their homebrew so seriously, and you want to take your homebrew seriously from the perspective of, like, the quality and care, but in terms of context, I think silly is better most of the time.
I'm always down for some camp. That's in my opinion. So yeah, you're 3 for 4.
Okay.
This is number 5 is the Marvelous Egg. Which is a large egg that should be incubated for up to 30 days, at the end of which a random animal companion is hatched that acts friendly towards you and obeys your commands.
Okay. If this isn't a real D&D thing, it should be. I like that idea quite a bit. It's similar to a couple other magic items that I know about, but I can't think of any that do that. There are a couple times that eggs show up in magic items. There's the bag of beans can summon eggs that if you eat them, your stomach explodes or you get stronger. I'm gonna say it's homebrew, but I feel like it's not. But I'm saying it is. I'm gonna guess it is.
It is homebrew. It's homebrew.
It is. Oh, yeah. Cool.
Yeah,
I like that a lot. Random like positive things are so much fun. I love that. The random animal companion is a great idea. I like it so much.
Yeah,
because then you could just make it something really silly.
Well, yeah, it came with there was like a chart that had like a D12 chart that had like, roll this and it's whatever animal thing, but I really could do whatever you want with it, honestly. But I was like, that's a fun I love an animal companion.
Yeah, it's a great way to, also it's a cheat code to make your players more invested in the game.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so our last one, number 6, is the Wand of Conducting. Which is a wand that, when waved around, creates a beautiful orchestral music that can be heard up to 60 feet away.
Okay, I'm going to say that this is a real item, and I'm going to say that it's a real item from 5th edition, and then I'm going to say that it's either a common magic item that came out somewhat recently when they sort of entered into 5th edition, or it's tied to, like the Wild of Witchlight book or something like that, like one of the campaign books that goes into weird settings. This is all a guess, but that's my guess. I'm locking it in.
Yeah, it is real. It is official. It's 5e.
Oh yes, nailed.
I didn't see what source book it was from, but that would make sense that it'd be Wild from Witchlight. But also, I want to say an orchestra like 60 feet away is not far enough. Orchestras are loud. Like, do you know how big like a music hall is? Like,
it's very loud.
Yeah,
very loud. Yeah. D&D does not translate well into real life, and vice versa.
I think
you want your universe to have a consistent internal logic. And that can be really messed with if you start trying to use logic from a different universe that has a completely different physics system and rules, Yeah.
But yeah, you got 5 out of 6.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah. Which is, hold on.
That's way better than I thought I was going to do.
Which is, I can do the math, I believe would be like an 84 to be.
I thought I was going to do so well.
Yeah, no, good. Well, you just missed the Ring of Contrariness, which I was like, that's one that I feel like because it sounds like a homebrew item in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a homebrew item, and also what it does sounds like a homebrew idea. Like, that sounds like something that somebody would think is fun, but they didn't actually think it all the way through, so they're still like working on it,
100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for playing.
That was great, dude. That was a fun game.
Hey, good. Next, I'm gonna give you a chance to shine a spotlight on something happening in the TTRPG world that you want people to pay attention to. You know, it can be a game, can be another content creator, actual play, whatever you think people should be as excited about as you are. What do you got for us, Cinder?
I'm gonna shout out another creator that I admire. There's a guy that goes by the name The Playmat. He is on Twitch, and he runs a lot of D&D actual plays. And I am somebody that does not do that many D&D actual plays as a player or as a putter-oner of them. Mm-hmm. And he is so legitimately entertaining and is a very, very good performer and an actor. I think he actually is like a professional actor in the past. But genuinely some of the more engaging actual plays, and he does a lot of work to make them very engaging and fun for the audience, which I think is something that is sometimes hard to do with actual plays, because it's like it's a lot of just sitting and watching some people talk, and if you miss 10 minutes you might miss the plot. But he does a lot of work to make it so it's engaging for the audience along the way, and that there's like ways that they can impact and interact with his games. I find his actual play setup and the way he runs them very impressive, so I would check that out. He's awesome. The Playmat.
Yeah, thank you so much for shining a spotlight. Last, what I would love to give you a chance to talk about what you have going on, where people can find you on the internet, any projects you have coming out soon.
Sure. So I'm Cinderblocksally on YouTube and on Twitch and on almost everything. I'm streaming I stream like 3 or 4 days a week, usually some combination of Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, where I run these homebrew review shows where people can come into the show, they can submit homebrew during the show, I put it on a big wheel, I spin the wheel, and I take the homebrew that gets picked, and I do like a writing workshop based on it, where I give it feedback based on grammar, syntax, sentence structure, like I would a short story, but I also give feedback based on game mechanics and just D&D design and that sort of thing. And the goal of it is always to be like, try to uplift the author and to try to encourage anybody that's watching or participating to write and to try to design, but more so to try to push themselves to like hold themselves to a higher standard of writing and of quality of design, and not to be like it is a failure. One of the things I say a lot on my show is I'm not ever judging you at all. Like you're an entity, you exist. I am judging your writing in its current iteration. That's what's going on here. So you can always improve. There's always growth. And it's, you have value just by existing. So your writing though might be crap, but we can get that writing good. We can do that. And that's cool. That's sort of the attitude that I try to go into it with. I want people to feel good about the fact that they are writing, but I'm also genuinely not going to sugarcoat it if you're doing stuff that is really taking away from your own work. Like so often people will do something with their writing where they don't realize that they have this amazing idea, and then they are shooting themselves in the foot as they step out the door, and no one is going to ever see or notice that amazing idea because they're doing silly little mistakes, or because that really amazing idea is slammed in between like 17 different things because it's just overly bloated. So a lot of that. And then the other thing is I'm working on this Kickstarter that's called Waste and Wild. It's a post-apocalyptic campaign world where the gods are all dead and their bodies have seeped into the earth and sort of enchanted the soil. So coal is kind of magical, and it's like a coal mining coal gold rush community where other creatures from other realms are coming to try to steal it, and you're playing the survivors trying to exist in this broken world, navigating survival while these like alien forces are coming in. And it's got a bunch of subclasses and monsters and factions and new game mechanics for vehicles and all sorts of stuff. It's a little bit like Magic Mad Max plus like Gold Rush times. So that's another thing I got going on. But yeah, if you like, I'm on YouTube and Twitch is where I sit mostly.
Cool. Yeah, all of your links and all of that where you can find Cinder will be down below. If you're not following Cinder, what are you doing? That's,
They're probably doing some wonderful things. They're probably living human lives, maybe caring for their families, taking walks.
How dare they? But Cinder, thank you so much for coming on and talking to me. It's such a good time.
Thanks for having me. This was great. This was lovely.
Thank you so much. And thank all of you for coming and hanging out with us. I hope you enjoyed what me and Cinder have been saying as much as we've been enjoying saying it. Make sure you stick around here at Open Table Adventures. You can see all of our other interviews with amazing content creators. You can see some of our recipes with recipes for adventures, all of our other actual plays, and so much more. As always, I've been Dan the Baker. This has been Open Table Adventures, and you are always welcome to pull up a seat. Bye-bye.